Hi, hello, and welcome on in for a new weekly episode of Cooking with Rambo. I know it's been a hot minute since we did this segment, but I had a reason to make another one finally. So today we're going to be making fortune cookies. For anyone who is not aware, my stream absolutely loves doing munchie times and feeding me fortune cookies, but they keep complaining that they're too stale and too old. So they wanted me to make new, fresh ones, and we're going to be making green ones for St. Patrick's Day. So in order to make these fortune cookies, you are going to need a couple of things. The first of which is 3 large eggs. You're also going to need 3/4 a cup of white sugar. Yes, I know this is a big container of sugar that I have here, but I learned this habit from my mom, so I'd stick with it. You're also going to need 1/2 cup of melted butter. I realized after I started getting ready to do this that I didn't actually have baking butter. Instead, I used my cooking butter, but it worked out just fine. You're also going to need 1/4 a teaspoon of vanilla extract, as well as 1/4 a teaspoon of almond extract. Honestly, based on my own experience with this recipe, you might be able to knock it down a little bit less than 1/4 of a teaspoon, but I don't know what that amount is. It's very much amaretto-y when I finish making these fortune cookies. And then, of course, you're going to need a cup of all-purpose flour as well. Those are the main ingredients. You will also end up needing about 3 tablespoons worth of water. I used food dye to make mine green, so I have food dye coming in on it. You're going to need cookie sheets so that you can actually bake these items. You're also preferably going to want some type of rubber matting to go on your cookie sheet, but you could honestly deal without it if you don't have it. And then they do technically suggest, and you'll see me do this later on, they suggest you have a cup to put the fortune cookie on top of to create the fold. I decided it wasn't worth it. The recipe I followed also suggested having a cupcake pan to stick them into so that they had somewhere to cool and harden into the shape you want. So I use a big 24 cupcake pan to put them into. But you do whatever you can with whatever you have. These are just the ingredients you need. Everything else is up to you. And then, of course, they're fortune cookies. You need fortunes. So you're going to see me in just a second cut up the fortunes. But let's go ahead and just finish gathering our materials, and then I'll jump on into the recipe. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've gotten everything out of the way here. I have some fortune cookie fortunes that I found online and printed out. I'm just going to go ahead and I sped this part up for you guys to 4 times speed because it's kind of a slow process. But I'm just going to go ahead and cut out these fortunes and get them as nice as possible. That way they're ready to go later on and I don't have to worry about it because once these cookies come out of the oven, they need to be shaped very quickly. You're not going to have time to cut fortunes then. So pre-cut all of your fortunes ahead of time and it'll work out better than you trying to cut them and the cookie getting solid before you can actually shape it. Now that our fortunes are all cut up and I got rid of all of the scrap paper, I'm just going to set these off to the side in a nice little stack. That way they're not in my way. And we're going to jump right on in to starting this recipe. I was referring to a phone at some points during this video, so if I kind of get distracted for a second, that's why, and I do apologize. The first step is going to be taking a mixing bowl and those 3 eggs, and technically, you do not need the full egg. We just need the egg white. So, I was taught to just separate the yolk from the white in the shells. You can see it's kind of dripping off the side of the shell there. You're going to bounce it back and forth very carefully, very slowly between the 2 different shells so that all of that egg white drops off in between the shells and the yolk stays inside the shells. I ended up saving these yolks to eat with some ramen later on. You do with them what you will, I guess. Technically, the yolk is the part with the most protein, so enjoy it or skip it. That's up to you. But we just need the whites for this recipe here. You're not going to need the yolks for anything later on either. So I'm just going to go through the process here of getting those yolks ready to go off in a bowl and getting the whites ready to go for our recipe. And then I'll catch you once I finish doing that with all 3 eggs. Alright, now our egg whites are ready to go. I put the yolks off to the side. We are going to be mixing the egg whites with the white sugar, and you're going to blend it until fluffy. Blend it until fluffy. So I'm just measuring out the 3/4 a cup of sugar to put into this, and then you're going to see me grab my mixer here, and I'm going to blend it until it's a nice fluffy consistency. Alright, now that it's all nice and fluffy, we're going to go ahead and measure out our butter as well as our vanilla and our almond extract. Now, like I said prior to this, I did not have actual baking butter on me, which are the sticks of butter, so I ended up using cooking butter for this instead, but to be honest, nothing beats the fact that the next cooking video you guys are gonna get, I ended up using shortening to make some Irish potatoes instead of using baking butter again, because I still don't have any on me, so it's okay! Butter's butter! It works, okay? So I'm just measuring out the butter in a measuring spoon here. I'm gonna plop it into the mixing bowl, and then I have little fourth a teaspoon spoons that I'm going to use to measure out the vanilla extract as well as the almond extract. Stick that in here, and then I'm gonna mix it up again. I'll catch you once we're done mixing it. Alright, we're wrapping up, mixing up what we got going on. It almost kind of looks like batter already, doesn't it? We're just going to be adding in our flour now at this point, which is what's going to finish making it a cookie instead of just sugar. So I'm measuring off on the side here the correct amount of flour, which is 1 cup of flour. It didn't technically specify if it needed to be sifted or not, so I'm not sifting it. I'm just pouring it into a measuring cup and then pouring that measuring cup into the mixing bowl. I would start out slow when you start the blender up, just because you don't want flour to go everywhere in your kitchen when you're doing this. But if that's your style, that's your style. You do you. Sometimes it's more fun to make a mess. So I'm just going to add in the flour, mix that up, and then once I have it completely mixed up, I'm personally adding food dye to it to make it green. But you don't have to add food dye to this. Normal fortune cookies do not have food dye added. And there's also natural alternatives to food dye that you could use to make them fun colors if you really wanted to. But I wanted St. Patrick's Day themed ones, so I'm adding green food dye. I think I ended up adding like a dozen drops to it. I started out with 6, but it wasn't as green as I wanted it. And honestly, they're still a very light green when I finally finish mixing them. So y'all do you. Personal preference. This is just what I wanted for my stream. But I'll catch you once I've added in the food dye. BRB. See, look at that lovely green we've got going on here. Isn't that amazing? I'm just cleaning everything up. I'm putting it off to the side so I have more workspace here at this point, which is why we're staring at a green bowl of dough. I don't know if this is dough. Is it considered cookie dough because they're cookies? I don't know. It's not the same consistency I'm used to for cookie dough. But what you're going to be doing now is you're going to take your cookie sheet. You should have your oven preheated to 375 degrees. Now, when you make fortune cookies, if you are making these by yourself, you really should only make 3 or so at a time. Fortune cookies cool down really, really fast, and you need to work with them while they are still warm. So if you're doing this by yourself, you're only going to be able to get 3 or 4 done before the material cools down so much that you can't bend it anymore. If you have someone else working with you, by all means, go ahead and make 6 of them at a time. But I personally did 3 at a time, and while I did have a decent bit of wait time in between each batch, it was still better than messing up a bunch of cookies. So I was told to use a tablespoon of this little cookie dough stuff to make a fortune cookie, and then you spread it out in a 3-inch circle. I'm going to be honest with you, I think a tablespoon was a little bit too much here, and I think 3 inches was a little bit too big of a circle. So I think next time I'm going to try doing like half of a tablespoon and see how they come out, and probably do a 2-inch circle instead of a 3-inch circle. I'll also definitely get more fortune cookies out of it because I got almost 3 dozen fortune cookies out of this batch. But each has their own personal preference. It's a really big cookie, and while it's not a bad thing to have a big cookie, I could end up eating up to 8 of these in a stream. So I'd rather not have a huge cookie that I have to eat 8 of. But I'm just using that same spoon to spread them out to approximately 3 inches. And then I am sticking that into our oven, like I said, at 375 degrees. It's going to be going in for 6 or so minutes, I think. Yeah, you just let it go. I start laying out the next batch of them while I was waiting. And then once they were ready to go, I took that batch out, put the next one in, and voila, fortune cookies. I'll see you when I start actually shaping them. Alright, so this is the first batch of cookies I did. The instructions did say to make sure that the rim, just the rim of the cookie, had a nice golden color to it. I wasn't sure if it was hard to see because the cookies were green or if it just wasn't enough of a golden. I did end up finding out after this very first tray that it just wasn't enough of a golden. But I also wasn't sure how hot these were, so I thought I was going to need to use a knife at first to peel them up. Having the silicone underneath, they did not stick at all. They weren't too hot for me to handle for a short period of time, so I ended up just ditching the knife and using my fingers. It told me in the instructions to put the fortune through the side quickly, but not too quickly, and I couldn't figure out what that meant. What it means is if you stick these in too soon, they are going to stick to the cookie, but you have to also make sure that you're not waiting too long, otherwise the cookie's not going to bend. This is that cup trick that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. They told me to sit it on the rim of a cup so that it would hold the shape, but it wasn't staying on the rim of the cup, so I ended up just grabbing the cupcake tray that they mentioned using and sticking it inside of the cupcake tray after creating the fold myself, and that held the shape pretty well. They probably could have been a little bit tighter, but it wasn't too bad that I was upset with it. But I just sped this up here because it's the same process over and over again. And I'm going to go ahead and speed up the entirety of making the rest of these cookies. And then I will show you guys the final product of how many cookies I made at the very end. Bye! And just like that, we have finished making, we have finished making all of our Fuji cookies! Don't they look amazing and green, perfect for the holiday season? I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I did speed up a lot of things, so in actuality, it took me like 3 hours to do this, but you got to watch it in 45 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you decide to stick around and catch out some of my future videos.